It is the Monday after Ohio State 31, Northwestern 7. We do it every week. This week, another win for Ohio State in the friendly confines of Wrigley Field. We have made it back to Columbus. Of course, that we is the 41-year vet Tim May and me, Spencer Holbrook. Let's talk, Tim. It is the aftermath or the before math of Ohio State Northwestern or Ohio State Indiana, however you want to look at it. Maybe we'll focus a little bit more on the latter this week because obviously it's a top 5 matchup in the horseshoe coming up. But let's talk the rewatch because everybody knows that we, grinded the tape. We figured out what the issues were. We've got all the world's problems solved now as it pertains to Ohio State football. What'd you learn, Tim, on the rewatch from Ohio State Northwestern?
I'm trying to stay in that math vernacular. That was like geometry math, and now this week is calculus math when it comes to playing Indiana. But the geometry math gave Ohio State some problems offensively. But to Ohio State's credit, I was saying this after the game too, is that I'm writing a little story about it as soon as we get done recording this. Is Ohio State went in there bound and determined to run the ball, and like a heavyweight fighter, they just kept throwing punches till they came up with a pretty respectable, in my opinion, rushing attack against the number 16 rush defense in the country. One thing I took from it was how persistent Ohio State was in running the ball, even though it wasn't ultra successful doing it. Number two, just like remember when I asked Chip Kelly this question a couple of weeks ago, do you ever have a time when you just want to, where you just kind of kick back and just throw the ball 50 times?
Yeah.
Obviously Ohio State, those days seem to be long gone, except from a desperation standpoint, maybe down the road. But Ohio State could have had a much bigger afternoon if it had also thrown the ball about 45 times. I do believe. I don't know if you agree or not, but what I took from it was in essence a thorough come from behind victory, and it included at the end even another goal line stand. Right? I mean, I was headed down to the field then and dealing with Wrigley Field security, as you guys did too, I'm sure. But the bottom line was, I think they got about as much out of that game as you could, with the exception of just blowing Northwestern out. But what is blowing Northwestern out? I mean, 31-7 is pretty thorough. I think you agree, right?
Yeah, it was thorough. I thought the offensive line did what I thought it did on, when I was rewatching it, I was like, yeah, the offensive line dominated in the second half as far as from the run game standpoint. Ohio State just looked a little clunky in the run game in the first half, and I don't know if that's because they were running some vanilla run concepts that Northwestern's probably seen a million times. Which I do believe that's what happens. We didn't see a lot of those interesting counter wrinkles, jet sweep wrinkles. We did see a little bit of two back, but not near as much as I think you'll see against Indiana. I think that has a little bit to do with it. And by the end, Ohio State's just wearing them down. And so then you start to see the pop runs even on some stuff that Northwestern had practiced for. I'm going to go ahead and credit that with the way that Ohio State was slowed down in the run game in the first half, just because I think if you played that game in a vacuum and Ohio State came out with, the full arsenal game plan, whatever you want to call it, I think they probably run the ball with more efficiency and just better in the first half, but they didn't.
Well, as one parent of a defensive player said to me, he goes, "Man, that was about as vanilla a run game as you could have in the first half," and I agreed with him from Ohio State's standpoint. And and just based on what we've been watching the last many weeks, right? One of the guys who has factored much more heavily in the run game was Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback. I'm just throwing that in case somebody just flew in from Mars. Um, uh, I think he had one carry in the game, if I remember correctly, the final stats. I've actually got him up on the screen on another stream, which I don't have up right now, but he had one carry. So that just showed you what they wanted to work on, for want of another term, and what they didn't want to show for some sudden reason. Instead of showing a lot of things, they showed nothing. They did jump back into robust for a Quinshon Judkins touchdown. That was interesting. They hadn't done that in a little while. And so there were different little things that they did keep doing. But the bottom line is they wanted to get out of that with as few injuries as possible. I haven't gotten the latest update on G. Scott, but the way Ryan Day, when he went out to investigate when G. Scott was down on the field, the tight end there in the second half, I remember watching Ryan out there, and all of a sudden he turned around and applauded, like, okay, this isn't serious, you know? And so you got to sometimes read the tea leaves because, as you well know, from an official standpoint, you rarely get anything of note from an injury standpoint from Ohio State, and definitely from Ryan Day. But I think that bodes well. And we'll see if they get Will Kazmarek back this week. I would think that'd still be pushing it based on what I've heard. But, you know, this is the biggest game in Ohio State's regular season to date. Ohio State versus unbeaten Indiana. And if you get all hands on deck, the better off you are. I'm not jumping ahead. I'm just saying it's interesting because I thought they got out of that game pretty sound physically. Of course, we've all seen the video. I didn't get to see the replay when it first happened immediately of Jeremiah Smith getting his leg twisted by that Northwestern defensive back. But Jeremiah Smith went back into the game later. He never went under the tent. So we'll see where that goes. But I'm telling you, that ought to be looked at by the league office, if not already.
Yeah, he got twisted up, and I thought that was a dirty play.
Well, the guy looked like he was calf roping him. I mean, he pulled him down and tried to do a little cinch move on it.
Yeah, I said on 97 on the Fan this morning, like, in football, dirty play is a heavy allegation because you don't want to label anybody a dirty.
Yeah, but that was obvious.
But yeah, that's what I'm getting at here is like that was pretty obvious. Like it was the play's over, let go of him, and instead he kind of turned over and then kept on his ankle, and I didn't like that.
No, it was a dirty play, is what it was. You could be more. I don't know why my phone keeps going off, but you can be more assertive on that notion because it clearly was, and the guy was proud of himself as he jumped up and ran back onto the field.
Yeah, not a great look for the player or for Northwestern. But that's neither here nor there, I guess. Jeremiah Smith did go back in the game. We'll see. He had that ice pack on his ankle coming out of the dugout. There on the first base line. It's so weird to be saying that stuff. But, yeah, he came out of the dugout, had that ice pack on as he made his way to the bus. Yep. But the fact that he went back in tells you a lot, especially in a blowout game that Ohio State was very clearly going to win at that point. And he got a carry. They gave him the ball to make sure he was okay. The G. Scott thing, weird because you're expecting to get Will Kazmarek back soon, and just as you were getting Will Kazmarek back, there's your other lead tight end laying on the ground hurt. And so it's like, oh, my gosh, you can't catch a break in that room. But it looked like G was okay, like you said. So the injury front. And then I'll go back to your original point, Tim. The Will Howard thing, they didn't run him, and I think that was on purpose. Like you said, that vanilla run game. His one carry was on a tush-push quarterback sneak that just, for the first time seemingly this year, didn't work.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a strategy there or if it just Northwestern got the better of you on one play. But they tried it, and it didn't work, and so they turned around and handed it to Quinshon on the next play. So that was Howard's only carry. So they kept all of the run game with the quarterback run in their back pocket. They kept a lot of the different motions and things into the run game in their back pocket. And offensively, when they needed plays, they just went through the air and got it with ease in the first half because Will Howard was throwing some absolute ropes. And then in the second half, when they needed the plays, they didn't really need anything in the second half. But as they went after the Jeremiah Smith catch and run and then the Carnell Tate touchdown, once that play happened at 21-7 or at 24-7, it was the game plan was pretty vanilla. And they just kind of ran the ball with a lot of efficiency and pretty effectively until the game was over. Yeah.
I mean, the two Carnell Tate passes were the definite highlights of the game. And just, it's funny, Spence, because everybody likes the new car, right? When you get the new car, that's the one you want to drive.
Yeah.
And so you understand the Jeremiah Smith phenomenon, and you got the classic car in the garage with a Mecca Egbuka, but you got this car that you got a couple of years ago with very little miles on it in terms of like big plays or big catches and stuff in Carnell Tate. And boy, did he show out in his hometown. I mean, that one diving catch was a work of art, both from the throw aspect of it, Will Howard rolling right and hitting him down the sideline there in the right corner of the end zone, the one that some people couldn't see, by the way, from where they were sitting, depending on which seats you ended up with. but then the little square in that he then took into the end zone for his second touchdown, that was also a really nice play. And boy, salute Carnell Tate, what he's been through, et cetera. But you and I both know, man, when it's come to the football aspect of things, ever since he showed up, I mean, even that summer, 2 summers ago, or when he lost his mom in that drive-by shooting thing, a random drive-by shooting thing in Chicago, man, he's been quite professional about his approach to playing the game of football. And there are moments in time when you have to step back, even as an objective media guy, and salute somebody and really put yourself in their shoes. Wow, what a moment that was for him and his extended family and friends, which took up almost one section of Wrigley. Definitely a box seat section.
Yeah. Tim, I've got one thing that I want to talk about the offense that you said.
Okay.
The classic car, the new car, then there's Carnell Tate. Carnell was awesome, and I think we did a good job of talking about that on Saturday. This team needs to get Emeka Egbuka going. Do you agree?
Well, I don't know if I would ruin a drive by having him try to throw the ball. I'm not sure about what that play was, but that was designed to get him going, and didn't work. I think it was him. It might have been Caleb Downs. It's hard to read the name sometimes. But the bottom line is, yeah. But I mean, what he can do. I mean, he was a forgotten was his input. Remember in the Georgia game a couple of years ago? I mean, he had a pretty good game. Not like Marvin Harrison Jr. But there, what he can do. I think it's just as important to establish Jeremiah Smith. But you're right. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, and I asked Carnell Tate about this last week. There seems to come times in games where all of a sudden Chip Kelly flips the page and it's the Carnell Tate page. We're going to run this stuff. Now, there are reads involved. Defenses line up to take away different players, et cetera. But you and I both know it was going to take a complex kind of defense to take away Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka in any game against anybody, right? That's what, just because somebody's dropping back into a pinch zone or whatever they're running from time to time, that doesn't mean the guy can't get open and make a big play, because we've seen Emeka Egbuka do that. But you're right. It's almost like they're saving their best for the last for the stretch run here. What's your take on that?
Well, he had 40 catches after the Oregon game. Through 6 games, he had 40 catches. He was wow, I can't talk. Rising up the record books. He only needed 30 some more catches to catch KJ Hill for most receptions in a career. He only needed 400 yards to catch Michael Jenkins for most receiving yards in a career. And we're thinking, okay, this is done and dusted. It's over. 4 games later, Tim. So he had 40 catches after the Oregon game. He's at 49 right now. In that Oregon game, he had 10 grabs for 93 yards and a touchdown. Just a massive game for him in the 1-point loss.
Yep.
In the last 4 games, so against Oregon alone, in those 60 minutes of football, 10 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown. In the last 4 games, he has 9 catches for 86 yards and 2 scores. Now, the 2 touchdowns, obviously big because he had the opening touchdown against Penn State. That's important. He had the touchdown last week against Purdue where they kind of gave him, and this isn't to knock Emeka, but a charity touchdown on the last possession of the game that the ones were in because, he hadn't had a grab all day.
Yeah.
And that's against a really bad Purdue defense. So, it does concern me a little bit that, and I know this is picking nits, but guess what? They just played Purdue and Northwestern. So, this is what we have to work with right now ahead of Indiana. Even against Penn State, he wasn't involved. 3 catches, 31 yards. He had the 1 touchdown. But after that, you didn't really hear from him. Again, 10 catches against Oregon alone. 9 catches in the last 4 games since then. He's one of the best receivers in the country. He's climbing up the Ohio State record books for a reason. And now to see him, in all likelihood, unless they just feed him the ball in the next 6 or 7 games that they play, he's not going to break those records because he's just been either shut down or even forgotten about. I wonder why, they can press that Carnell button, like you said, where they did the 5 catches on 1 drive against Purdue to Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious that they have to get Jeremiah Smith the ball, and they do. But there are times where I think like you also have to get the ball to Emeka Egbuka. And however you have to do that, you should do that. And maybe it's something that they'll dust off and he'll have 11 catches for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns against Indiana, and we'll say, wow, Spencer, you're really stupid. But
you gave me I'm gonna have a really nice bold prediction about him on Friday when we do our bold predictions. So thanks for setting me up there. Number 2, you always knew this was going to happen. There were going to be moments in the season where one guy is shining and one guy from a statistical standpoint, and one guy or guys aren't, because you can't, this isn't the old days of the keystone combination of a quarterback and a favorite receiver. Those are long gone. And Chip Kelly, wants to spread the ball around as much as possible. And number 3, maybe Emeka's hands were sore after that Oregon game. I'm just joking. I'm being facetious. But the bottom line is, but here's what when they do finally, when the merry-go-round does finally come back to the Emeka Egbuka package, it's there. It's going to work. I mean, he's going to be coming out of the slot a lot. You wanted to get these other guys going. Definitely, you want to definitely make Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith is the lighthouse when it comes to the receivers on this team, from the standpoint of everybody notices him. You got to do something to take him out of the game, one form or fashion. Boy, and on that big long play he had where we talked about how he got his leg twisted at the end of it, Jeremiah Smith, that might have been Will Howard's best pass of the day. And or why did you throw that one? Because it went right through a ridiculously narrow window. Jeremiah Smith caught it in stride and went up the right sideline. But you got to figure somebody had to be on another part of the field, had to be wide open. You know what I mean? Because every defender had Jeremiah Smith in their sights. So you never know. You never know where it's going, is what I'm saying. I think it's a luxury to have a little used in the receiving game, Emeka Egbuka, over the last 3 games, headed into these last 2 games, which means so much for the Buckeyes. 1, to get to Indianapolis by beating Indiana, and number 2, to avenge the last 3 years against Michigan. I think it's huge that he seems to be still in fresh, tip-top condition, because we know this time a year ago he wasn't.
That is a good way to put a pin in the offense, because we need to talk defense. The offense, I thought Will Howard was completely on point. His best outing throwing the football, maybe in an Ohio State uniform, just zipping the ball all around. And then I watched Justin Herbert on Sunday Night Football zipping it into tight windows, and I was like, man, like I saw 2 quarterbacks just kind of, trusting their arm in the intermediate throws. That throw to G. Scott from Will Howard was, whew.
That was a dime. It's called a dime.
Yeah, you're not going to get much better than that down the seam. And then the deep balls to Jeremiah Smith, which I still don't know if that hit the ground or not, to be honest. And then to Carnell Tate, those were incredible throws. So, I thought Will Howard was really good. The run game got going in the second half. Carnell Tate, obviously the star of the show. And the offensive line progressively showed some dominance. And I think that they'll be much less vanilla, maybe a little bit more chocolate as they go into
Neapolitan.
Into the Indiana game. Let's talk defense, Tim, and I'm going to start with just.
Can I say one more quick thing about I thought the offensive line. You knew that Northwestern had some things for them. I mean, you're not 16th in the country 9 games into this season without being pretty good against the run. You understand what I'm saying? And I thought they had some really good angles and stuff they took. But I thought this offensive line really got a hold of it as the game went on, and really worked that Northwestern defensive line over for the most part. Now, granted, Ohio State did get stale in the 4th quarter. Ryan Day even mentioned that after the game, and he was right. They couldn't get a sustained drive really like they would like to kind of put everything away, right? That's a little bit of a concern, I think, coming out of that game. But I think this offensive line, man, we've talked about it before. They've hit on a combination that's pretty nice. Considering that's not the way they started. And I even congratulated Carson Hinsman. I was talking to his dad, but I was congratulating him and talking to his dad about him being patient and working through whatever the challenges were he had to work through. I think the left side of that line looks pretty good right now. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think they're really coming together. You can nitpick if you would like, and that's on Ohio State to do. But, again, vanilla run game, second half dominance. They ran the ball really, really well in the second half. And this is where we'll officially put the pin in the offensive conversation, Tim. They ran the ball 16 times for 55 yards in the first half. Now, 3 of those attempts are from the 1-yard line.
Yeah.
So you can really say 13 times for 53 yards.
There you go, doing that math again.
But it makes it look a little better, but not really.
Yeah.
And then in the second half, they had 17 runs for 118 yards. Like, that just shows you the discrepancy, or the valley there between the two. They were just so much better there.
That's why you keep running, though. That's why you keep running, especially when you feel like you're a championship football team. That's why you keep running. And people sometimes have a hard time, even sports writer, media guys, we have a hard time understanding that. But that's why you do it, because it is like a boxing match. You're just trying to work on that other team until finally they let you get a few punches in, that they don't see coming. So, that's what I'm writing about, because I think it's so important these next 2 games that they do have that run game, or that other team knows they've got the run game. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Ohio State fans, let me tell you something about Rhoback activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback just released their new game day collection, and it's awesome. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing this level of custom designs with the quality of activewear. Rhoback does it better. Rhoback's everyday short are the perfect pairing as well. They are comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short, but the comfort of athletic shorts. Rhoback is also proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with college stars Jalen Milroe, the quarterback at Alabama, Quinn Ewers, quarterback at Texas, former Buckeye, and Ohio State safety Caleb Downs, one of your favorite players on the team. I know it. Among others, they're becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. They've got a lot of Ohio State stuff, the Block O on some things, Ohio State logos all over those polos. Use the code Lettermen20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Lettermen20. Go check it out. Rhoback Activewear. Enter the code Lettermen20 for 20% off your first purchase from our friends over at Rhoback. I've been rocking the Rhoback hoodie for a long time. Come join the fun. You've been wanting Rhoback. Now you've got a chance to get some Rhoback and get the Ohio State logo on Rhoback. Go to Rhoback.com, Lettermen20 for 20% off your first purchase from the folks over at Rhoback. So, okay, let's talk defense.
Yeah.
20 minutes of offense for a 31-7 game. Whew, that's a lot. Maybe 20 minutes of defense. I don't know. Maybe we'll just go 10 minutes on defense. But we got to start with the corners, right? Yeah. 2 things, and I think they can both be true at the same time. The 3rd and longs where, Denzel Burke's getting beat across the middle for a long gain, and, they're giving up 3rd and 12, 3rd and 10. Like, that's not good enough. You've got to be better there. And I think the cornerback play, in the simplest terms possible, it just has to be better. It has to be better against Indiana. It has to be better if they're going to play Oregon again. And if it's not better against Indiana, they might not get to play Oregon again. I'm not putting Michigan into that bucket because Michigan's receivers are terrible. But you have to be better at cornerback play. Now, the other side of that coin, Tim, is watch Northwestern the first 9 games of the season and find me the game where they threw a back shoulder 3rd and 12 to a receiver over a cornerback for first down. I don't think you'll find it. Then find me one where Jack Lausch becomes Will Howard, for lack of a better term, and hole shots between a safety and a corner where Caleb Downs is coming over to try to break it up, and the receiver holds on to it this year. I watched a lot of Northwestern in the lead up to this game because I'm a freak and I watch a lot of college football. I haven't seen them do it this year, and then they did it twice against Ohio State in the first half.
Right.
Again, 2 things can be true at the same time. That's not dismissing what the corners did wrong, because the corners absolutely have to be better. But there's a part of that that's like, okay, like Northwestern just made a couple of damn good plays and you have to keep moving on. The corners, though, Denzel Burke, I think, gave up 5 catches for 36 yards. Jermaine Matthews, I think it said, no, 4 catches, I'm sorry, for 36 yards. Jermaine Matthews gave up 5 catches on 8 targets. I think a lot of that was in zone coverage. But I still think that that's not good enough. And then Davison Igbinosun gets another penalty. I mean, he's the most penalized corner in the country. The corners have to be better, Tim.
Yeah, I'm looking at, though, I mean, Ohio State has changed, in my opinion. I mean, has changed quite a bit since the Oregon game, in the sense of no matter what, nobody gets out of the corral. You know what I mean? And they've tried to up their pressure with some games up front. So you're going to give up some crossing routes. You're going to give up some things like that when a guy just has to run with another guy across the field. I mean, that's just going to happen. The good thing is they've almost in almost every instance they've had a safety over the top, whether it be Jordan Hancock, rotating back there into the deep safety. A lot of times they've had 2. The main thing is they haven't let plays out of the gate. And I'm trying to think of another cliche you can throw in there. They haven't let they haven't let. Now I'm not going to get into that one. I had another cliche, but it was going to be quasi dirty. Bottom line is they haven't let teams score. I mean, Northwestern scored 1 touchdown on Saturday, and it was a nice drive. They had the ball 2 possessions, the first 2 possessions of the 2 out of their. Let me start back over. Ohio State had 1 possession in the first quarter of that game. Ohio State gave up 2 extended drives in terms of plays over the first quarter and a half, or third of that game. And yet Northwestern came up dry, after their first touchdown, came up dry the rest of the way. That's still pretty damn good defense when you hold any team to 7 points. And that was a legit hold them to 7 points performance. I don't know if you agree or not. So you're not going to stop everything anybody ever runs. I mean, watch everybody playing football around the country now. Nobody is stopping everybody on everything. And if you're going to do this, you're going to lose a little bit there. So understand where they're going there. Denzel has had a little bit of a challenge because people have targeted him, legitimately so. But I think for the most part, he was in and around the vicinity, and Jermaine Matthews played a lot more, not just for Denzel, but he played some for Igbinosun on Saturday. So, you've got that mix going. I really like when they've got the 5 DBs in there. I think it looks pretty good. And here's what I remind people, you can play zone and stuff, but zone defense always dissolves into man-to-man at the very end of somebody being on a guy and making a play. And, when you look at Northwestern and how much they had the ball on Saturday, I think 32 minutes in that game, and ended up with how many total offensive yards? 251. They averaged 3.1 yards per play.
Tim, I'm gonna
3.8 yards per play. I think you take that.
3.8 is a good number. Below 3, and you're like historically good. Even against the worst teams in FBS, if you're averaging below 3 yards a play defensively, you are doing your job and then some. I think there was one of the games, it was either Western Michigan or Marshall or even Iowa. I can't remember which one, and I will look it up and maybe put it in the comments. Ohio State gave, I think, 2.8 yards per play, and I was just flabbergasted because that is hard to do. It is very hard to do. And it's even harder to do when you give up 3 different pass plays of 20 yards or more on 3rd and 4th down alone, and you still only give up 3.8 yards a play. That is like, okay, Northwestern's getting, blind squirrel find a nut moments there. But other than that, they're getting absolutely nothing from this Ohio State defense. And I do think, I'm glad that you said that, because it's some good perspective of like, there's some gaffes there in the secondary, but by and large, like, man, you're really, really stifling Ohio. You're really, really stifling an offense there. And again, we're going to couch this all with Northwestern's offense is not good. It's one of the bottom 10 offenses in the country. but it didn't look it to start, and Ohio State
Yeah.
ended up making the adjustments they needed to.
Yeah, let me throw this in there too. After Northwestern scored its touchdown, Ohio State came back and scored. Right, Ohio State scored what 21 points in the last in in the last 7 minutes of the first half, which really took over the game. You know, we'll get to that in a minute. The Dave Adolph block punt after the Northwestern punter has to run down the high snap back at the goal line, but Northwestern went punt, gave the ball over on downs, punt, 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 or punt after that. You know, I mean, that's a pretty good defensive performance after you tightened up. They always talk about tightening things up. Jack Sawyer was talking about it. You know, a couple other defenders. Jordan Hancock talked about it after the game. Tighten what up? Well, what they really tightened up was, you know, those little scramble plays that Jack Lausch had earlier in the game. That's what they tightened up, not letting him get by them as easily as he did to keep some drives alive. And so, you know, it basically comes down to being aware while you're attacking. Be aware that a guy can run right past you, for another term. And I thought they did a really good job of that. And you know, Northwestern came into that game with one of the worst offenses in the country, and except for 2 drives in the first half, the first 2 drives, they left with one of the worst offenses in the country.
Well, Tim, I just did some sticky note math. I think by now the folks know that I like my sticky notes.
Yes.
I go through quite a few of them. I leave them; they're all over the wall here because I write them down. I write
some of them are on my back. I notice when I get home from practice some days.
Yeah, they say kick me.
Yeah. Shut up, it says.
First 2 drives of the game, Northwestern had the fumble on 3rd down deep in Ohio State territory, and then had the 92-yard touchdown drive. They had 151 yards total offense after the first 2 drives. They had 251 total yards on the rest of the game. That includes, so they had 100 yards flat after the first 2 drives of the game, but that also includes a 48-yard drive in absolute garbage time when Ohio State had the second-team defense entirely second-team defense, including some threes. And Northwestern still had the starters in, which I'm not sure, you know, was Ohio State's favorite thing, that Northwestern kept the starters in there. It's kind of customary when you see full brigade of 2s and 3s going in. You know, it's time to
well, they're probably not going to a bowl game, so, you know, it's going to be difficult at this point, right?
Yeah.
So why not let them play, right?
That last drive, Tim, that final throwaway drive was 48 yards in the 4th quarter, and ended in a thrown away pass on 4th down. So that was 199 yards. So the first 2 drives and then the very last garbage time drive with the backup Ohio State defenders in equaled 199 yards. That's 52 yards the rest of the game for Northwestern in the meat of that game where Ohio State took over. That included 3 3-and-outs, a 4-and-out, and then a 13-play 54-yard drive that looked like Northwestern was more so trying to eat clock to avoid a blowout than it was actually score points. You know, I'm not, and again, there are clear issues. I'm not here to sugarcoat those issues, but there's some perspective to be had there where when Ohio State tightened up and the game started to become real in the 2nd quarter, Ohio State kind of put its foot in the dirt and said, like, all right, we're done playing with our food here. Let's eat the damn thing. And it was over. So, you know, I think there's something to be said for that. I thought the best part of this entire game was Jack Sawyer's pressure rate. He was all over the place. Again, I will say it again and again. The man cannot buy a sack. I don't know what he has to do. Or how much NIL money it's going to cost him to buy a sack.
He needs a lasso. That's what he needs. He needs a lasso.
He is so close at all times to getting a sack, and he just can't, you know, just wrap his arms around a quarterback and throw him to the ground. But he had the forced fumble there in the 1st quarter. I thought he was fantastic on Saturday. And then the other guy that just absolutely deserves praise, and he got Defensive Player of the Game from the Ohio State program. Man, you're starting to see remember when they said that they've what did they say? Activated Caleb Downs. I think they have activated Sonny Styles. He looks like he is shot out of a cannon on the blitzing downs where he's being sent to get after the quarterback. He's looking like he's becoming more comfortable in run fits. He talked about it on Wednesday, and I thought it was really interesting where he said, like, you know, in September and early October, like you're seeing some of these counter plays, you're seeing some of these pulling actions for the first time, or the first 10 times. And he said, I've seen these run plays now, no matter who the opponent is, I've seen these run plays now hundreds of times or 100 times. I know where to be now, and I'm filling my gaps better. I think he's really starting to come into his own at linebacker. It means great things for Ohio State in November, December, and potentially January. And I think it means great things for Ohio State in 2025, Tim, because I think he is one of those guys that you'll see return to be a centerpiece of this defense next year. He is becoming a star in this defense.
The other guy who's been activated and hadn't been, he did. I'm trying to stammer. I'm stammering here because I'm trying to think of a fireworks analogy. Let's just say this. C.J. Hicks is playing more and more. That means he's in their plans. They've figured out ways that he can help them and vice versa. If you follow my drift there, that's a great talent to be having coming online here in the last part of the Big Ten season and then headed into the playoffs. There are guys that are rising, man. And some of them, like you just pointed out about Sonny Styles, they're regulars. He's getting used to playing all aspects of the linebacker position. And that, I keep using the word bodes well, but that does bode well for this team going into Saturday.
Yeah, it certainly does. Because Indiana, they're known, Tim, so much for throwing the football around, and Curtis Rourke and those receivers. But man, they want to run the ball, and they've been really good at running the ball. And they're a balanced offensive attack. And Ohio State, for all the talk this week that's going to be about the cornerbacks and needing to be on point against these Indiana receivers, like the linebackers have to be good. The defensive line has to be disruptive up front. I thought Tyleik Williams looked a little rusty, if we're being honest. There were some times where I thought he looked decent. There were some times where I thought, he needed to get back into the flow of things. This defense has a tremendous challenge this week against Indiana. I have a lot of faith in the Ohio State offense's ability to score points against Indiana. But this defense, Penn State didn't really challenge this defense because of the receivers, or lack thereof, I guess. Penn State just does not have the receiver talent to challenge Ohio State in any way or in any, concernable way. Oregon did, and we saw what Oregon did to this team. This is the remaining challenge here. And if you can lock down, or not even lock down, but just challenge these Indiana receivers, you're going to beat Indiana, and you're probably going to feel better about going into that Oregon rematch with the way that your corners played. If you struggle against Indiana, if you struggle with these Indiana receivers on the outside for Ohio State, you're either A, not getting to the rematch against Indiana, or B, you're going to feel terrible about your chances in the rematch against Oregon because your corners are not going to be prepared for that challenge. So This is going to be a very, very telling game for me for how deep this Ohio State team can go in the college football playoff, because win or lose this game, with the win against Penn State, they're probably going to beat Michigan. Like, I think they still will get in the playoff.
Yep. They will have beaten the other two teams with one loss.
Exactly. So, I just this is going to be a really telling week for me for how deep this team can go into January, win or lose.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And by the way, I hope no one's taking Michigan for granted.
No, we're not taking them for granted.
Michigan I know you're not. Michigan trying to save its season is what that's going to be. And good luck with that, Michigan. But but no, we're going to talk about Indiana through the rest of the week. But this is an incredibly well-coached football team as opposed to badminton team. An incredibly well-coached team that Ohio State's running into on Saturday in Ohio Stadium at noon. Yeah, get there early. Complain, but get there early, right? But the bottom line is it's a very well-coached team that has a plan. And, boy, with a week off, they're going to have a plan. Northwestern had a plan for Ohio State having the week off between the last time it played and then taking on Ohio State. And you saw it work there for a little while, and then it didn't. Indiana is a much more talented team. You can see it. It's not smoke and mirrors. They got kind of shut down in the second half by Michigan. They still had enough money in the bank to win the game. Kurt Cignetti, if he can win this game by 1 point, he knows that counts as much as 50. They beat Nebraska 56-7. Ohio State struggled against Nebraska. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why this team should be taken seriously. And the biggest one of which is it's off to its best start in school history, is 10-0, is number 5 in the, probably will still stay number 5 in the college football playoff rankings. Yes, this is a legit opponent coming into Ohio Stadium on Saturday, which is hard to believe, but is a great poster child, Indiana is, for what you can do in the modern college football world of transfer portal and maybe a little bit of NIL. I don't know how much NIL they had to come up with to bring guys from James Madison. You know what I mean? But they came up with it, you know. And when you can come up with a group of players who are talented, maybe not as talented as your roster, but turn them into a true team, you got something going for you.
You sure do. And Ohio State has a lot going for it this week as well, starting with the fact that it is at home for a top 5 matchup. Isn't that a wonderful thing, Tim, that you can actually play a top 5 matchup at home? Because Ohio State, for some reason, had to go on the road and play 2 of those things. And now they get to finally have a top 5
But
game.
who saw this one coming?
No, not you and I will tell you that.
Not anybody.
I don't think the Big Ten did either.
Not even Google. If you check Google didn't have this one coming.
Well, the funny thing is the Big Ten knows what it's doing with these schedules, and it did set up both Ohio State and Michigan. If you look at the November portion of these schedules, the Big Ten gave Ohio State Northwestern, Purdue, and Indiana to lead into the Michigan game. They gave Michigan Northwestern, Indiana, and there's another opponent in there somewhere. But I don't remember who they play this week. But they play Northwestern this week. But they gave them a few like cupcake Big Ten games to get to this Ohio State-Michigan matchup. And then all of a sudden, the Michigan game is now a 5-5 team against a top 5 team. And lo and behold, Ohio State's got to play a top 5 game the week before. Just when the Big Ten thinks that it's doing the right thing for its biggest brands, here comes Kurt Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. And we've got a good one here that we're going to break down all week. We don't need to get into too much more of this. We don't need to go more than 40 minutes here. The people need to get on with their Mondays. But on Tuesday, we'll be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for Ohio State press conference with head coach Ryan Day, with defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, and with quarterback Will Howard. On Wednesday, we'll have full breakdowns of all of that. On Thursday, we'll have Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. And then on Friday, we'll have bold predictions. But you guys already know that. You know the drill because you've been here at Lettermen Row on the YouTube channel. If you haven't, like the video below, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then get your tail over to lettermenrow.com right now. Big things going on over there. $1 for your first 7 days, then 50% off a year. You can get some great coverage from the crew, from Tim May, from me, Spencer Holbrook, from Alex Gleitman, Mick Walker. On the recruiting side, big recruiting weekend ahead for Ohio State. That's a lot to tell you, but you already know everything because you're over at lettermenrow.com already. If you're not, head there right now. Tim May, the 41-year vet. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.